Good evening, Rabbi. We're here to talk about two important topics tonight. One of them is the elections coming up, impending elections coming up. You know, they say, right, that the Jewish people, when they give lectures in the synagogue, they always talk about the next holiday, which is coming up, to tell you what to do for the next holiday, how to conduct the holiday, how to perform the holiday properly, the proper customs, the proper laws. Here, the upcoming holiday is what? Is Election Day. That's also a holiday, right? So, how do I get this idea that Election Day is a holiday? How do I come up with this conclusion? The truth is, right, that this was actually branded by a big rabbi, who was Rabbi Cutler, who was the one of the big rabbis in America that came from Europe. This was like we're talking about 70, 80 years ago. He came and he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Lakewood, of the famous Lakewood Yeshiva over there in Lakewood. That's where your friend is, Alon, you know, Yossi's brother, over there. So he was the Rosh Yeshiva over there. He was the one who built that community. He built the yeshiva. Rabbi Cutler used to say that the election day in Israel is like a day of judgment, you know, like Yom Kippur, you know, like Yom Rosh Hashanah. Can you imagine? That's what he used to say. So you know what he used to do, Rabbi Cutler? He was so much involved with this whole thing about the elections. He actually would go. He lived, as I told you, he lived in America. But he would, when the elections were coming in Israel, he would go a couple of weeks before and campaign for the religious party that was at that time, which was Agudat Yisrael. He would campaign for them. Why is that? Because he knew that the power of the religious parties over there in Israel is what dictates, you know, what allows us to have religious freedom, religious rights, you know, all kinds of things like this, instead of being discriminated against, you know, by those crazy, you know, Erev Rav, you know, like the people you spoke about. So people like that, right? So we have people like that in Israel also, even worse, right? Even worse. So the point is like this, right? That Aaron Cutler used to say that Yom Kippur is like, he would say that the election day in Israel is like a day of judgment, you know? Can you imagine? So what does that mean? That the outcome of the election is we're gonna be judged by that, in the sense that, you know, we have to deal with the consequences of who gets elected and what kind of policy he enacts for the people, for the country, whatever it is, for the world. So it comes out that here, you see from there, Rabbi Cutler, who was one of the great rabbis, and he wasn't exactly a modern rabbi, you know, I mean, he was an old-fashioned, you know, Haredi, you know, real old school, right? The Rabbi Cutler, he was one of the great rabbis of the generation. He even was very much encouraged this, and he himself also participated, not only by voting, by campaigning as well. That's the way it was, right? We also have the great Chazon Ish, who was also in the same generation as Rabbi Cutler, a little bit before him. Chazon Ish also was very vehement about making sure that the elections are conducted properly in Israel, and we should campaign and we should vote. He very much encouraged that, because he knew that our power as religious people depends on, you know, how much representation we have in the Congress and the Knesset or whatever it is, right? As the president, the vice president, the prime minister, Rosh HaMemshala, blah blah blah. All these things, it has to do with us. You know, we're the ones who are going to suffer the consequences, and we're the ones who are going to profit from the bounty that if they choose somebody good. So therefore, right, the Chazon Ish was also very much involved with that, and he's the one who told us that we should vote and we should also participate as well. So what does that mean to participate? You know, I'll tell you what that means. In Israel, the big rabbis, you know, not only the Chazon Ish, but who already passed away a long time ago. We're talking about like 80 years ago he passed away, you know? But we're talking about people who came after him as well. We're talking about Rav Shach, we're talking about Maran, our rabbi, Moreno Rabbeinu, Rabbi Yosef. He also encouraged us very much to participate, to vote, right? And he, not only that, right, he used to send us out, by the way, you should know. There was only one time out of the learning cycle in the yeshivot, we were also in our yeshiva, in our kollel, Maran, the rabbi, would send us out. They would tell us, stop learning now. Close the Gemara, close the Shulchan Aruch, close the Bet Yosef, and go door to door and campaign for the religious parties. Go campaign for Shas, which was his party. The rabbi had his own party, you know what I mean? That's what it was, right? So he used to tell us, you have to go out now, close the books, go out and campaign. And we did it. You know, every elections, we were going out to campaign. That's what we were doing. What does that mean? Knocking door by door, you know? They would drive us to a certain neighborhood, you know, and we would just get out of the van. You know, the van would drive us, and they would give us like sandwiches, you know, to eat, whatever, some snacks, you know, and we would like go door to door, you know, knock. Hi, shalom, how are you? Can we come in? Can we speak with you? We give them some election information, some paraphernalia, all kinds of things like this, all kinds of pamphlets and all kinds of things to encourage them to vote. Even like religious symbols we used to use. All kinds of things about religion, tehillim, kameot, amulets, all kinds of things like this. We used every trick in the book, let's put it this way, right? In order to convince them to vote for the religious parties, for Shas, because we were part of Shas. We worked for Shas. That's what we did. But we were rabbis, okay, we were Torah students, but nevertheless, the rabbi told us, no, now you're not a rabbi now. Now you have to go out and campaign. You're a politician. Go knock door to door. That's what he used to do, right? And they would give us some pennies also, a few pennies, pay us a little bit. Sometimes we were getting paid, sometimes we wouldn't get paid. Who cares about that? It was a couple of grumpy shekels, here and there. Nothing major, you know what I mean? The whole point was that we were doing the will of the rabbi, but he was telling us to do that. That's the whole thing. So, also we see other very big rabbis. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Shalom, also who was one of the great rabbis in America, the big posek. He was over here. He also encouraged everybody to go out and vote. Not to miss this opportunity. So, there was many more rabbis. Again, there are also some rabbis who are against, participating in elections, especially in Israel. I'm not talking about here. I'm talking about in Israel, because they say it's a Zionist, it's a Zionist regime, right. It's an evil regime, whatever, They're like Nazis, whatever, I don't know, whatever they want to call them. But the point is that the prevailing opinion is not like that. The prevailing opinion is that you do vote, and most of the big Chachamim encourage us very, very much to vote and to participate in the elections. Yeah. So that's what we did. So therefore, you see, right, same thing applies here as well to America. That, by choosing our leaders, by our elected officials, we are making a destiny. We're choosing our own destiny like that, because we know what their policies are. We know what they're thinking in their head. We know who they are, right? We know their character. We know what they're worth. We know what they've done in the past, and we can assume, right, that whatever they did in the past is going to be the same thing in the future. Nothing is going to change. These people don't change. They don't become all of a sudden, angels from the sky. Sure. Whatever they were 10 years ago, whatever they were 5, that's what they're going to be right now also. Yeah. Nothing's going to change with them.
Why do we put up with it, though?
Because we have no choice. This is the system that we have, right? Democracy. You know what they used to say, right? In England, there was the famous prime minister over there used to say, right? Right? Democracy is a terrible system, but it's the best system that we have. It's terrible, but it's the best thing we have right now. We have nothing better,
Who said that? Churchill?
Right, Churchill. Yeah, I think it was Churchill. Yeah. He was a smart guy, Churchill, right? He was clever. Okay, so that's the idea. That's the way it works. So therefore, we have to go out and vote. And we should not consider it like, I'm going to waste my time, and have to stand online, and they may not let me in, they're going to ask me for an ID and all kinds of things like this, right? And maybe I'll fill it out the wrong way, blah, 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 all kinds of, don't be afraid of that, just go. Move your feet, right? Get off your, butt, and go out in there and vote. You got to do that. That's the way you got to do. There's no choice. It's a mitzvah to vote. Consider it a mitzvah. This is what Maran used to tell us, Maran Obadiah Shalom. You know what he used to tell us? He said it's a mamash, a mitzvah to vote. You shouldn't think that it's some kind of just a good civic duty, No, it's a mitzvah. You have to do it. Because you're choosing your destiny, your religious destiny, your social destiny. You're choosing everything by that. So therefore, the rabbi used to convince us every time. And he himself, by the way, was an example. It's not like he told us to do it and he wouldn't do. He also did it. He also campaigned. What does that mean? He didn't go door to door. He was already too old for that. But he used to make phone calls, and speeches, and just gather people and talk to them. I'll tell you something really funny. That did you ever think, right, that I was over there? This was like about 10 years ago. The rabbi was still alive at that time. He passed away 7 years ago, right? So I used to, I was over there in his house, in the shul. The house was upstairs. All you had to do was go up the stairs, and you were there. One flight of stairs. So what happened was that one day I was there, and they were having elections. So what happened was that
English,
no, he didn't speak English. No, he spoke Arabic and Hebrew. That's all he spoke. Yeah. So what happened was that he knew some English words, like some funny things. He used to say some funny things, make some jokes, whatever. But the point was like this, right? That he gathered over there. He also wanted the Georgian community, to vote for Shas. He wanted to recruit them. So what he did was he brought all the Georgian rabbis from all over Israel, to gather them. They all came to his synagogue, and we went upstairs to his house. And I wasn't one of those Georgian rabbis, who was invited to this event,
right.
Because these are the people who are working as rabbis over there. They have a community. I was studying in yeshiva. So what happened was I saw that they were gathering, these rabbis, talking about old rabbis over there, the elders over there in Israel.
Sure.
Right? not the young gherkins, not the younger ones. So what happened was that I saw that they're gathering, they told me. So I told his son, the rabbi's son, I said, Moshe, can you let me go up and sit with them? I want to see what's going on. I told him I'm also Georgian, I want to see what's flying over there. So he told me, no problem, go up, he says, he knew me, So he let me go up, and I see the rabbi, like, there's a big table, like a big dining room table up there. I knew the house, how it looks. I was there many, many times. So, and these Georgian rabbis are sitting, around the table, and he's telling them, you have to vote for Shas, trying to convince them, Can you imagine? This was like an official meeting. And who was there? Aryeh Deri, right? Who was the leader of Shas? He was there. He was praising Aryeh Deri, how great he is, how good he is, blah, blah, blah. Whatever, all these things, right? Why am I telling you all this, right? I'm not a politician, whatever, but what I tell you is that the rabbi was very, very vehemently involved in the elections, He considered it to be like very crucial, because he said to us, you should know that all the things that we do, all the mitzvot that we do, building mikvaot, building schools, yeshivot, building kollels, building all kinds of religious institutions, it's because we have the budget to do that. What gives us the budget? Because we're in the elections. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the budget. You need a budget for these things, There's got to be money. It doesn't come from the sky. You know what I mean? You have to be practical about these things. So the rabbi saved many, many souls like that, putting them into yeshivot, putting them into religious schools. How did he do that? Making mikvaot in places where they didn't have a mikvah, in all kinds of boondocks places in Israel where nobody built a mikvah over there. And he used to build them, with their own money. They used to shas, build them. He told us one time, the rabbi, Al Shalom, he says, from all the money that we got in the elections, he said, we already built like 200 mikvaot. Can you imagine? 200 in Israel. All these kinds of places here. And how do you get that money? From the elections. That's the way it was, So this is the way the rabbi used to do. This is the way, and he saved a lot of children also, got them into yeshivot, so he made them religious, he made them more Torah, closer to Torah. All in the zechut, all in the merit of having the elections. That's what he did, So he made sure to tell us that this is the way it has to be. I'm telling you, so you should know. This was the way it was. It wasn't a joke over there. It was reality over there, this whole thing. It wasn't something like, oh yeah, well, maybe. He would tell us, no, you got to close the books now. Start working for the elections. Okay, so here, for us here, there's not really much to do. We're not politically connected to any party, whatever. But what I'm saying is, right, that at least you should go and vote. That's the least you can do, right? If you don't even want to do that, you really got a problem, you know what I mean? So the rabbi used to tell us, you should know, by the way, that let's say a person, okay, he says, you know what, I won't vote for the good guy, I won't vote for the bad guy, right? The right, the left, whatever it is, right? I just won't go, I'll just sit at home, I'll grump. I'll be grumpy in my house, I don't want to deal with that stuff. So you should say, he told us, the rabbi, if you do that, if you're complacent and you don't vote, you're giving power to the bad side, the side of evil, the side of Satan. Because they're going to have more representation if you don't go to vote. You know what I mean? It's all relative, right? It depends on how much people voted, how many people voted. It goes according to percentages, So the more people that go out and vote, the bigger the pool is, and the more representation you get. So if people don't go, even though they're not voting for the bad guy, but de facto, you're electing the bad guy. That's what it is, right? You have to understand that. Mm-hmm. So when you don't go, it's like, that complacency is destroying the society. And that's why everybody, whether it's a good side or bad side, everybody's encouraging people, just get out and vote. Just do it. Whoever you believe in, right, you should vote for him. You know what I mean? We know who we believe in, right? We know who's the right side, we know who's the wrong side. We know who's right for abortions, which is murder. We know who's for gay marriages, which is, it's like, promiscuity. We know who's for, which party stands for these things. We don't want to vote for a party like that, obviously, right? It's not asur to vote for, because you're strengthening the Satan, you're strengthening the Sitra Achra, the side of the evil, by voting for people like that. Liberals, these liberals, left-wingers. They may be, by the way, very charming people, as we said, right? They're smart, charming, some of them giggle very nicely. They have all kinds of charming, personalities, but they're all evil because they're the side of evil, abortions, gay marriages, homosexuality, things like this, all kinds of evil, anti-Israel, anti-Semitism, the anti-Semites, some of them, So how can you vote for somebody like that, How can a Jew go out and vote for somebody who's known to be an anti-Semite? The party is full of anti-Semites. They're infested with anti-Semites over there. How can you vote for a party like that? They're against life, they're against God, they're against the Bible, they're against religion, they're against Jews, they're against Judaism, they're against Israel. So you go and vote for them? So you're killing yourself. It's like self-destruct mode, That's what it is. You want to self-destruct? Go ahead, Who can stop you? I mean, that's what you want to do. But you're going to give judgment for that. Even for the things that you voted. The rabbi used to say, it's like a mitzvah. So you know what that means? The rabbis tell us, as a joke, like kind of whatever. But I think there was some reality in that too. He tells us, that there's a custom by the Sfardim that before they do a mitzvah, they say Leshem Yichud, which is a special prayer, to identify the mitzvah that you're doing and what kind of tikkun it's making, rectification. So he tells us, when you go and vote also, you should say Leshem Yichud. Because you're doing a mitzvah, you should know, it's a mamash a mitzvah to put that envelope into the ballot box. Or whichever ways you're voting, I don't know how they do it, whatever it is, right? You got it. It's a mitzvah. That's what he used to tell us, So you have to understand that. It's very, very important to understand. So therefore, right, the person should know that, and therefore, right, act accordingly. Go and vote on time. I'll tell you, right, something interesting also regarding that. That the Rabbi Shalom, he was very, particular with his time, like schedule, like everything was very scheduled. So there was no waste of time with him. Everything was very tight. The schedule was very tight. But there was a couple of things that he used to hold very dearly, in his repertoire. So therefore, the first thing he would do on election day after he prayed, after prayers, we prayed at 7 o'clock in the morning. 8 o'clock it was done. The first thing he would do was to go and vote, on election day. The first thing he did was vote. Not like to wait, until afterwards, oh yeah, let me study a little bit, a little Torah, let me have some lunch, some breakfast. And then I'll take a nap maybe, and then I'll do this and I'll do that. I'll have some meetings, and then I'll go 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. What's the problem, He closes at 10. I still have time, No, the first thing he did was to go and vote, right after the prayers, 8 o'clock in the morning. That's what he used to do. That's how important he considered it. So you see from there, right? That's the idea. That's the way it has to be. So the rule is like this. I asked one of my rabbis. This was 30 years ago. I asked him, I said, this was when, you remember this election where Clinton was running against Dole? Do you remember that election? Mm-hmm. Right, Bill Clinton against Bob Dole. Mm-hmm. Bill against Bob, right? So who was the bad guy over there, right? Dole was known to say some anti-Semitic things, He was against Israel. He was he had a problem with Israel.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, he had a problem. He had a chip on his shoulder with Israel.
Yeah, I know
he said all kinds of comments.
He wanted morality.
Right.
And
as opposed to Clinton, Clinton was more pro-Israel, as at least in speech, right? In speech.
Yeah, yeah.
So the point was, I asked my rabbi at that time, I said to him, who do you vote for? I'm not really sure. Because I usually, like the Republicans better, you know what I mean? That's
and
my...
He said Dole.
Right. Yeah. But I said to myself, but this guy's anti-Semitic, he said some anti-Semitic things. So who do you vote for in a case like that? So what he tells me? I tell him, Rabbi, who do I vote for? So he says, vote for whoever is best for the Jews. That's what he said, I didn't ask him anything. Just said, who to vote for? He said, whoever is good for the Jews, vote for him. So I said, okay, let me take a guess. Who's good for the Jews? This guy, huh? He says, yeah, you're right. He agreed with me. He knew that Clinton was more friendly to the Jews than Bob Dole was. So he said, therefore, go and vote for Clinton. Even right. Yeah. So now, here also, right, in this election, it's very clear, right, who's against the Jews and who's with the Jews. You know what's going on, right?
As a matter of fact, Clinton was very, very, he didn't like Arafat. You remember when he was trying to make peace, and he said, I have a man standing here who's willing to give you 95% of what you're asking. And because of that 5%, you won't make peace. You remember?
Yeah. So, the point is like this, right, that whatever it is, Clinton wasn't no angel either, right? You know that. He was no angel. He was pretty sleazy, right? But the point is that, whoever's best for the Jews, this is what a person has to look at, I think it's in this election, it's very clear. There's no doubt about it, right? You're talking about Obama's vice president, You know what Obama was for the Jews, right? He was a disaster, So, you know what he was for Israel, disaster. So,
gave them money.
Gave them money, but he also stuck some knives into their backs, lots of knives. You know what I mean?
Do you think it did damage, though?
Oh, great damage.
Really?
He did with Iran. He gave them money, he strengthened them. He supported Iran, which is the biggest enemy of the Jews. You know what I mean? He did it on purpose, by the way. He knew what he was doing. He also did some damage in the United Nations over there. He did lots of damage to the Jewish people, Obama. So the point is, right, that bottom line is that you have to vote for somebody who's best for the Jews. Whoever is best for Israel, best for the Jewish people, best for religion, best for our rights, religious rights, our rights as Jews, as citizens, who's against anti-Semitism, that's the idea. That's what you have to vote for, obviously. It's very clear. Okay, so the point is like this, right? That get out and vote, because the earlier the better, right? Zizim Makdimim. The ones who are more industrious, they go early. They don't wait for the last minute. Okay, so now I want to talk about something else, which is about covering the hair. The truth is that several questions always come up about this. Does a person have to cover his hair or not? Does he have to wear a kippah? Or does he have to wear like a hat, whatever it is, right? Like a rabbinic hat, some cylinder, whatever it said, or some turban, whatever it is, right? All kinds of things like this. So where does this idea come from, right? That a person has to cover his hair. So the truth is, that in Judaism, covering the head is considered to be like a very prime importance. The person should be walking around like, exposed with his head. So, in Western culture, that's what people do. They walk around with nothing on their head. Most people, right? But in Judaism, the accepted culture, the accepted way is to cover your hair with something. I'm not talking now about women, by the way, because women, we already had a class about that. If they have to cover their hair or whatever, we had a class about that. We can also touch on that maybe tonight as well. But the point is, right, that in Judaism, covering the hair is considered to be of prime importance. So the question is why? Why in Judaism covering the hair, or covering the head, going with the head covering, is considered to be so important? So we have some, sources in the Gemara, in the Talmud, regarding this, right? We have something in Masechet Kiddushin. It says over there that one rabbi was claiming praise for himself. He was praising himself. He said that what? He said, I never went 4 amot, 2 meters, 6 feet, without covering my hair. I never walked 6 feet anywhere without covering my hair. So he praised himself for that. So we see from there, right, that it's not considered to be proper for a person to be walking around with his head uncovered. It's not a proper thing. It's not so good. Since this rabbi considered to be so praiseworthy. But the question is it an obligation, really, like according to halakha? Or is it just a good custom? Or is it like a stringency? Which definition does it fall into? Which category does it fall into? Right? That's the question, right? So the truth is we find a machloket, just like everything else, we find a machloket. We find there's dispute about these things. But the truth is that in many places in the Talmud, you see from there that it's not really an obligation to go with the head covering. It's more like the proper custom, the proper mode of conduct. And it's also like a stringency. Like piety. There are many places in Talmud which that's the way it comes out. And by the way, even this Talmud that I mentioned to you now, Masechet Kiddushin, it also implies like that. What does that mean? This rabbi was praising himself, for not walking 4 amot, 6 feet, without head covering. But if it's obligation, what are you praising yourself for? You're obligated to do that. What's the big praise? Everybody's supposed to do it. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it implies that it's a stringency a little bit. It's not exactly obligation so much. And that's what the Gaon Vilna says, right? Gaon Vilna says that you see from this Gemara that it's not really an obligation to cover your hair. When you walk around the street. Because if it was, why would this rabbi be praising himself for that if it's an obligation? You're obligated to do it. What's the big deal, What are you praising yourself for? You're a rabbi, obviously you're going to do it. It's obvious. It's simple. There are also other places in the Talmud where it implies different things, right? There's different elements there. I'll tell you something else very interesting. There's a story in the Gemara like this, in Masechet Shabbat, that there was one mother of one of the rabbis in the Talmud, and this mother, right? She went to like some kind of astrologist, fortune teller, something like this, right? So she wanted to know, like, if her son is going to come out to be good or bad, whatever. She was pregnant. So she goes over there, right, and she asked this guy, this fortune teller, whatever, astrologer, whatever it is, right? By the way, you're not supposed to be going to these people, the astrologers or fortune tellers. That's a different story. But anyway, she went for some reason, whatever it was, she went. And she was asking him, so this guy's telling her, your son is going to be a thief, Kurdi kreva, The man of steel, remember, man of steel. He's going to be a man of steel. So she got really shocked, like, whoa, my child is going to be a thief, How am I going to, stick my head out in society, It's going to be a shame like that. You know what I mean? So he asked this guy, she went and asked the rabbis, like, what can I do to remedy this problem, if this is my mazal, if this is my fortune, So they told her, the rabbis told her like this: when he's born, the day that he's born, always cover his hair, like put something on top of him, some kind of a kudi, some kind of a kippah, some kind of a yarmulke, some kind of a hat, whatever it is, and something, always something we should on top of his head, So that's the way she raised him, from the day that he was born, always, he had something on top of his head, always. So what happened was that, the kid turned out to be good, like he was fine. So, there's a story over there that says like this, right? That one day, he asked his mother, like, why do you always cover my hair? You don't never let me go, like, anywhere without covering my hair. So she said, because I was told like this and this, she told him the story, So he says, you know what? He says, maybe I'll try, to see it. I'll uncover my hair. I'll see what happens, like, let's see if it's true. So what happens? He takes off his kippah, he had a kippah on his head. He takes it off, and all of a sudden, he sees like some fruits in the tree, and he wants to like take them, he had a desire to take them. So it was like theft, Right away, when he took off the kippah, his desire for theft came into him, like he wanted to steal. Can you imagine such a thing as this, So some people have like a nature like that. They have to steal, they have to rob you. They gotta take something from you. Otherwise they can't get rest, But it's been. The other people have this nature like this, So he had like that. So then he realized, he said, oh my God, So what happened? He kept the kippah on his head all the time, and he turned out to be a big rabbi actually, Instead of becoming a thief, became a big rabbi, big chacham. So you see from there, right, that how important it is to cover your hair. From there, right? That a person can save a person from becoming a bad guy, from becoming a deviant, from becoming a degenerate, by covering your hair. So what is the general rule when it comes to that? The general rule is, right, when you cover your hair, what happens is that it gives you humility. It gives you like fear of God, like who's above you. It's like a way to to connect a little bit more with the spiritual. Because when you don't cover your hair, you feel like free, I'm a free man, I can do whatever I want. When you cover your hair, it's like you're lowering yourself, humbling yourself. There's something above me, besides, I'm not the only one in this world. There's also God. You know what I mean? So this is the reason why covering your hair is considered to be a very, very important thing, because it can also save you from sinning as well. There's also another Gemara, which is also very interesting, right? This is actually in the Talmud. It's not a Gemara, it's in the Mishnah over there in Kala Rabati. It says over there something amazing, right? That there was 3 rabbis were sinning, right? Who was that? Rabbi Akiva, in times of the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Eliezer. So one guy passed by them, and he wasn't covering his hair. Totally open. So one of them, he says, this guy, he doesn't cover his hair. He says, you know what he is? He's a mamzer, mamzer yario, What's a mamzer? That's somebody who, illegitimate child, somebody who was born from adultery. The other one says, no, he's not a mamzer, he's a ben nida, that means his mother didn't go to the mikveh, He was born like impure. That's why he doesn't cover his hair. So Rabbi Akiva came after them. One was Rabbi Yoshua, one was Rabbi Eliezer. He says, no, it's both, he says. It's mamzer and ben nida. Both. He combined both of them, right? So you see from there, the Gemara is telling you also another thing, right? Which is that the Talmud is telling you that person doesn't cover his hair is considered to be like, like blemished in his neshama, It's a blemish. In Western society, this is the way everybody walks around, right? But you know what it is, right? Western society is also blemished, It's a blemished society. You have to understand that, right? According to the Torah, the whole society is blemished. So therefore, it's no wonder that they walk around like that, right? Without covering their hair. So what does that mean? That when a person covers his hair, that shows that he has humility instead of having arrogance. So why do they call this guy, by the way, when he doesn't cover his hair? Why do they call him a mamzer? And why do they call him a ben nida? You know why? Because they say that a person who's a mamzer, or ben nida, or both, both, right? You know what his character is, right? He's brazen, very arrogant person, He has no shame. just goes in, jumps in, and starts, No, our place starts funny, like he has no shame for anything. Like Biden does, he grabs those girls, gropes them, There's a camera on you, you have no shame. Like, how can you do that in front of the camera? There's no shame. You know what I mean? You grope people like that, and they're embarrassed, like you're embarrassing them. You don't care. You know what I mean? A person like that, who's so brazen, like this, he's a mamzer, or he's a ben nida, or both. So part of that whole package of being brazen, being arrogant, you know what it is? That he doesn't cover his hair because he thinks he's like, he can do whatever he wants, like the whole world is mine. There's nothing above me, nothing above, nothing below. Right? Just me, that's all there is. Me, myself, and I. That's all there is in this world. I'm the master of my destiny, Nobody tells me what to do. Nobody tells me how to dress. Nobody tells me how to behave. I choose everything. That's like a mamzer, ben nida, a person who's blemished. Because he thinks that he's in control of everything. There's no God, there's nothing above, nothing below. That's it. So you see from there, right, that the Torah goes into the depths of what it means to cover your hair, what it really means in your personality. So the personality, right, so you know what it is, right, that unfortunately in our generation, one person told me, I met one person from the community over here in Ringo Park. Majority who they are here, right, where they come from. So he tells me, he says, where we come from, he says, most of us, our mothers didn't go to the mikveh. We know, like, that's the way it was over there. They were not going to mikveh, He says, that's why we turned out the way we did. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's not really, it's somewhat, they're not even to blame for that because it's really their mother's fault, their parents' fault for what they did to him. But he turned out to be what he did. And he's an arrogant person. He's very brazen, no shame. Goes out in the street, has no shame with the way he behaves. He's willing to do anything, That's what we're talking about. So this is all, all these signs are indicative, right? The fact that you cover your hair or not indicates all kinds of things like this. How your personality is, how your fear of God is, right? How much you have God in your life. How much God is in your life is indicated by if you cover your hair or not sometimes. You know what I mean? Because that shows that Ragas is Geshinya, like you have some kind of authority over you. Otherwise, you have nothing. That's what it is. So what's the bottom line, right? We talked about a lot of things over here right now. We discussed this angle, that angle. The truth is, right, that as we said, right, that I guess you could get away with it, in a sense that it's not really an obligation according to halacha. Even though it says in the Shulchan Aruch, by the way. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says in Siman Bet that a person, there's two things over there. It says in halacha, Sif Bet. It says over there, Sif Bav. It says you're not allowed to go with a upright stature. When you walk around, like erect, like you're like your head sticking up like this. Your neck posture. This, you have to go a little bit down. Sort of tabdabloba. A little bit humility. When you go like this. One of those guys. You see those guys, right? They think on top of everything. They think they control everybody. So that's the way it is, right? With people like that. So says the Shulchan Aruch, there's obligation according to Torah not to go with komas kufa, with an erect posture like this. Erect. Arrogance shows that you're an arrogant person. But also besides the same halacha, it says also you should not go arba amot, you should not go 6 feet, as we said, without covering your hair. So it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. But interesting, right? The language of Shulchan Aruch doesn't say there that it's forbidden. It says that you should not. So it also implies a little bit that it's not so much an obligation, 100%, to wear kippah all the time. But nevertheless, right, it is the proper mode of conduct in Judaism, to always cover your hair. Whenever you can, right? Excluding when, obviously, you can't, right? For instance, let's say a person that went swimming, he's in the ocean, right? He went into the ocean to swim, or to the swimming pool. He can't cover his hair over there, What is he going to do? He's going to swim with a kippah? He's going to lose it over there, right? What kind of thing is that, right? So a person has to have also some seichel, some intellect. You have to understand, there are places where you can't wear kippah. You know what I mean? When you go swimming, you want to wear kippah? You can't do that, right? So not every time you have to wear kippah. You have to wear kippah wherever it's relevant to wear kippah, where you're going in a normal way. So then there's no reason why not, why you should not wear kippah. tell you something interesting, right? That the Syrian, Jews, who are, a very interesting community, they have all kinds of interesting customs. Many of them are in Brooklyn, you know that, right? In Flatbush over there. So they have this custom, from their old country, from Syria. That when they were working, laboring, they would not put a head covering, and that was their custom. Like when you work, you don't cover your hair. And there is, by the way, some, as we said, right, there is some substantiation to that. Because when you're working, you're not really concentrating on other things. You got your mind on the job, so you don't really have time now to talk about God-fearing, and this. You're doing your job, you got a labor to do. You know what I mean? So it's not really a time of fear of God at that time. So much, you know what I mean? So therefore the custom was not to cover their hair when they were working, at the time that they worked. So one time what happened was that they came to a certain rabbi, Posek over here, Poskim, and they asked him, they said, can we continue to do like that, in America? Because many of them came to America from Syria, some of them came from Argentina, whatever it is, right? They came, and they wanted to continue doing like that here as well. When they work, no kippah, Meaning what? When they go to business, right, wherever it is, right, in the garment district, right, whatever it is that they're working, right, they're in the garment, a lot of them are in the garment industry. There's all kinds of real estate, whatever it is that they're doing, right? These businessmen, they're going without head coverings. So it says that they asked the rabbi, can we continue like that also over here in America? So the rabbi, after thinking about it, he told them, he said, this rabbi, he said, in America you shouldn't do that, I'll tell you why. So he explained to them, even though your custom by the Syrians, in Syria was like that, to when you work, you don't cover your hair, but in America you can't do this way, So he explained to them why. He said the reason is because in America, what happens is that everybody dresses modern, like everybody dresses the same. You can't tell a person by the way he dresses if he's Jewish or not, generally, right? Unless he's Hasidic or something, right? Somebody like that, right? But if it's a general, regular Jew, you're run-of-the-mill Jew, you can't see that he's Jewish by his dress. He dresses like everybody else, pants, shirt, t-shirt, whatever, sweater, right, all kinds of sweatshirt. They're wearing all the same clothes, So there's no discernment the way they dress, the Jews and the Goyim in this country. They all dress the same, In the business world, they all have suits, with the ties, right? And you know how it is, right? Every place you go, everybody dresses the same. So the only way you can really identify yourself as a Jew is by wearing a kippah. That's the whole thing. So the only way that you show yourself as a Jew is by your kippah. There's nothing else. So therefore he told them, in this country you cannot do that because they don't know that you're Jewish if you do that. They can't even see that you're Jewish. But a Jew has an obligation to identify himself as a Jew. He can't pretend that he's a goy. It says in Shulchan Aruch you should know, right? But a Jew is not allowed to tell people that he's a goy. Can you imagine? It says, by the way, in Shulchan Aruch that you can't even do that to save your life. Even to save your life, you can't tell people that you're a goy. Can you imagine? Because it's desecration in the name of God. So therefore, a person has to always identify himself as a Jew. How does he do that? By having something which symbolizes his Judaism. Right? So in America, what's that? The kippah. That's what symbolizes you as a Jew. So therefore, that's what you should do. That's the idea, So therefore, the rest of this rabbi told them, in America, you have to identify. So the truth is, right, that this rabbi said something very, very smart. So what I mean to say, that even though there are many poskim hold that it's not really an obligation to wear a kippah all the time, it's just like a proper custom, or it's a proper behavior, or it's a stringency, whatever it is, saintliness, whatever it is, right? But nevertheless, in our times, since we don't really distinguish ourselves from anybody else except with that thing, with that kippah, this is the only thing that identifies us as a Jew. So therefore, that's the only thing that we do. Therefore, it's really like it became an obligation in one sense, right? In the sense that it's the only thing that we have left to show the people that we're Jewish. Otherwise, there's nothing left. So therefore, according to this idea, the truth is, right, the universal custom is by the religious Jews, everybody wears a kippah because of this reason, right? And this is a proper mode of conduct, by the way, right? Today, in our times, proper mode of conduct is to always be wearing a kippah all the time as a Jew, so you can identify yourself as a Jew. There's a whole story about this with Moshe Rabbeinu, right? That when he came to the house of Yitro, they thought he was Egyptian. According to some opinions, they thought he was Egyptian. So they didn't know that he was Jewish. So he got punished for that, right? The fact that he didn't reveal, he didn't tell them that he was Jewish. So this idea, right, is very, very prevalent in the Jewish world. Right? You're not allowed to say, yeah.
I actually always wondered about that. I thought that in order to save yourself, you'd be at least allowed to.
Right. So the Shulchan Aruch says you're not allowed to do that. Even to save your life, you're not allowed to tell people that you're a goy, that you're a Christian, whatever, you're a Slavic, whatever, God knows, or whatever.
What if you tell a person, nothing?
What does it mean nothing?
It's the same thing?
I mean, you have to tell them, you cannot tell them you're a goy. You have to tell them that you're Jewish, so they have to know that you're Jewish. So a person has an obligation to identify himself as a Jew, because a Jew is not like everybody else.
Yeah.
The chosen people, the chosen people is something else. Different plateau, different standard.
Some people actually saved their lives in the concentration camps by lying.
Maybe it could be. It's possible. Yeah, it could be. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. There was a lot of things that happened over there. All kinds of strange, crazy things happen over there.
I happen to know someone who was about to be gassed, and they took him out because he.
Yeah. By the way, you should know that Hitler's policy was like this, right? That you don't have to be really Jewish to be exterminated. Even if you had like one grandmother or grandparent who was Jewish, that was enough. They took you in. You know what I mean? So that wasn't his policy that you had to be dafka Jewish. And if you had even one Jewish grandparent, they picked you up. That was his policy. Okay, whatever. Anyway, right? The bottom line is that covering your hair nowadays is just a way of saying that you're Jewish. And as we said, it also inculcates in you all kinds of good qualities, good personality traits, character traits. As we said, right, gives you a fear of God, and so forth and so on. And there's also other issues, by the way, when it comes to covering your hair, covering your head. There's also the issue of prayers, right? Are you allowed to pray or study Torah if you're not covering your head? Right? Or do you have to cover? Like everybody who comes into the shul, they all put on a kippah, right? Why is it? Because they know that when you come in here, you're praying, you're studying Torah, whatever it is, right? You cannot do that without covering your hair.
You're not allowed.
So the truth is, right, that there's also dispute regarding this as well.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That there are some who say, there are some sources in the Gemara that seem to say, you're allowed to make a blessing, without covering your head. On the other hand, the Rambam says you're not allowed to pray, though, to do prayers without covering your head.
Okay.
If you want to pray, like let's say Shachrit, Mincha, Arvit, whatever it is, right, these prayers, to cover your head. There's also other places where, like for instance, a person can say Kriyat Shema, Shema Yisrael, sometimes even without covering his head. There are some places in Talmud like that as well. So what does that mean? That really, right, according to the strict din, bottom line, bare bones din, bare bones halacha, a person can make a bracha without covering his head. It's possible.
Is that where the Pope got it from? Because he wears a kippah.
Well,
I always wondered where's that. It has to be something.
Yeah, for them everything is for idolatry. That's the difference, right?
Symbolic.
So it's for idolatry. We do it for God; they do it for their satanic, worship.
So you don't think there's a connection there that the Pope wears a kippah?
Yeah, they copy us. Everything they do, they copy us. What they do, it's all copycat.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's all not all of it, but some of it. So, copycat.
A lot.
So a lot of copycat. So that's the way it works, right? That a person. So the question is like this, as we said: are you allowed to pray without covering your hair? So the truth is, right, that a woman, who's single, right, let's say, and she's not married, so she doesn't have to cover her hair. So she's also allowed to pray without covering her hair as well. And this is the custom, by the way. In the yeshivot, in the Bet Yaakovs, they don't cover their hair when they pray. So technically speaking, a person is not really obligated to cover his hair when he says a bracha. But a man, on the other hand, right, a man, when he's praying, the Rambam says he should cover his hair. It's a little bit different than the woman. Not the same thing exactly. So therefore, the proper thing to do is when you pray, you should cover your hair. But let's say a person, I'll give you an example, right? Let's say a person prayed and he didn't cover his head. So does he have to pray again? And the rule is no, he doesn't have to pray again because he fulfills his obligation, Okay. Even though he didn't do it with the hair covering, he should have covered his hair. But he doesn't have to pray again. Well, let's say a person, I'll take another example, right? He said Kriyat Shema without covering his head. Does he have to do it again? No, he doesn't have to do it again, right? Or let's say he, I'll give you another example. Let's say he, what do I want to say? He read the Torah also, let's say he studied some Torah without covering his head. What does that mean? He has to do it again? No. Whatever he did. But the proper thing to do, as we said, is to cover your head when you do these kinds of things, the proper mode of thought. But if you didn't do it, you still fulfilled your obligation because it's not really, something which is so crucial that like altogether, stops the mitzvah, holds back the mitzvah altogether. It's not that crucial, but it's a proper thing to do for all modes of prayer all modes of these kinds of things are godly. When you're doing like service of God, you should always be, your hair should be covered. So the bottom line, right, is like this: that as a Jew, it says in the Shulchan Aruch, the proper thing to do is to cover your hair. At all times, except when it's not relevant, right? Let's say you're in the shower. Where are you going to go? To keep it with a shower, or you're going to sleep in the shower? You're going to sleep with the kippah on? Some, by the way, say you should also sleep with the kippah. There are some Kabbalists who say this, But according to halakha, you're not obligated to do that. You know what I mean? You're not obligated to sleep with the kippah. You're sleeping, for God's sakes. I mean, what can you do when you're sleeping? So that far we don't have to go, right? To wear kippah when you're in the shower, when you're in the swimming pool, when you're sleeping. That much you don't have to do. But when you're doing just your daily life and you're going out in the public, you want to show people that you're Jewish. You have to identify yourself. So therefore, the proper thing to do. And by the way, they respect you more when you do that. They don't like Jews with shaky knees. Their knees are shaking. Quaking. From fear. What are you afraid of? God made you a Jew. What are you afraid of? Be what you are. Don't be shy. Don't be bashful. Mm-hmm. Don't be ashamed of what you are. You should be proud of what you are. That's the whole thing, right? So therefore, the proper thing to do is always to wear kippah. But as we said, right, that the ones who don't wear kippah, all the time, we can't really call them sinners, like they're not. We can't go that far, because the truth is, that there are many sources in the Talmud, as we said, in the Rishonim, poskim, that say it's really like a stringency. This thing, it's more like piety. But the proper thing to do is always to have a kippah. That's the proper way to do. That's why all the Orthodox people, all the religious people, they always give a kippah on their head. And this inculcates in them fear of God, good character traits, humility, modesty, all the good things that come from covering your head. Also, another thing I want to tell you, right, which is that there are also higher levels regarding this. We just talked about the base level. Right. But the higher level is like what? That the truth is, right, that it says in several places, in the Shulchan Aruch, a couple of places, that when a person is like saying Amidah, let's say Amidah, silent prayer, or he's doing Birkat Hamazon, right? At that time, you should be having two head coverings. Not only one, two, right? So kippah and also a hat on top of it, or something like that, or like some kind of some kind of a scarf or whatever it is on top of it, because those situations which are you're closer to God in those situations, Birkat Hamazon, Amidah, right, the Shemona Esrei, in places like that, a person should even opt to wear two head coverings. And also a person who's like, more God-fearing, like a rabbi, a Torah scholar, or a holy person like that, tzaddik, a person like that should always have two head coverings all the time. When he walks around, because it's the proper thing to do for his stature, because two head coverings shows that's already like a different level, lots of humility, lots of fear of God. It shows that he's on a different plateau altogether. So a person, when he has two head coverings, and by the way, there are also many women who are stringent about this, to put two head coverings. They put one like skull cap, and then on top of it they put something else, like a scarf or something, whatever, or some kind of a handkerchief, bandana, whatever it is, right? Things like that. They put on one on top of the other. They have two. And the righteous women who come from very good families, very religious families, that's what they do. I'm talking about the ones who are married, or they're widowed, or whatever, divorced, whatever it is, right? They put two. Because when you put two, that's already like a different level, You become just like very God-fearing, become very humble. It makes you, right, just more, your personality becomes more polished, more composed, So that's already a different level altogether, you know what I mean? So therefore, a person who wants to go to the higher levels of God, fear of God, very, very good idea to have even two head coverings, right? But the custom is like this, right? By the religious Jews, even the rabbis we're talking about, right, who are more like pious, whatever, that when they're studying Torah, they usually have just one, because the Torah itself is the holiness. Yeah. You know what I mean? So you don't need more than that. But when they're going around and in the street, whatever, then they put two even. So two is considered to be really, really the best way to do it, right? Some even put, by the way, three. That's already, it's a different level altogether. But definitely two is considered to be very, 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 very praiseworthy. I'll tell you something else also. That even though by the Ashkenazim, what happens is that when they say Birkat Hamazon, after they eat the meals, grace after meals, they put the hats, On top of the kippah, they also put a hat. In the yeshiva world, the Ashkenazim. But Maran Rabbi, my rabbi, when he was saying Birkat Hamazon, he only had one. So he didn't put his hat when he said Birkat Hamazon. He only put it when he prayed, the Amidah, when he prayed the Mincha, Arvit, Shachrit. He had two head coverings, right? In the Shachrit, he put kippah, and then on top of the talit, also, talit. And in the evening, he put the hat, cylinder. So, by the Sfardim, the custom is like this, right? That when they say Birkat Hamazon, they don't put two head coverings. This is what I saw in all the good families, by the Sfardim, all the big rabbis. And also, Maran Rabbi himself also did not put two head coverings when he was saying Birkat Hamazon. But when it comes to Amidah, they do put two. That's the way it is, right? So all these things show us a lot of interesting elements, right, of covering your hair. So as we said, right, that it's considered to be, even though we can't, as we said, we cannot really say that it's an obligation, but the rabbis, looked very much down, at people who don't cover their hair, when they walk around. It shows that they have a character flaw. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So therefore, a person should try to go to the local Judaica center, and invest in some good kippahs, to put them on, because that shows already he's becoming more of a refined Jew, the proper behavior, the proper dress, the proper mode of conduct is going to bring him to God, fear of God, as we said also, right? And also, as we said, right, very important to recap this, that if a person has flaws in his character, especially, which most of us do, we're not perfect, most of us have a lot of flaws. As we said, right, this boy was going to grow up to be a thief, and we have other flaws as well, right? Some of us have this Yetzer Hara, some of us have this inclination, all kinds of things. How do we do that? By covering your kippah, covering your head with the kippah, you're destroying that inclination. You're limiting it, right? You're cribbing it. So it's considered to be very, very good for a person his character is not so refined as it is. So if he's going to wear a head covering, he's going to become much more refined, and all the bad character traits are going to go away from him because of that. So, right, it's definitely something to think about. So a person, Hashem should help us to go in the ways of humility and in the ways of good character traits. When you dress in a certain way, this inculcates in you, the proper character. Mm-hmm. In other words, the way you behave on the outside also changes the way you feel on the inside. The way you dress. Mm-hmm. So a person shouldn't underestimate that, by the way. You shouldn't think, it's not what you do on the outside, it's how you feel on the inside, right? You know what it is, right? That these Jews were not religious, they say, right? In my heart I'm Jewish, like in my heart. It doesn't matter how you dress, it doesn't matter what you put on your head, it doesn't matter if you put tzitzit, it doesn't matter what you put if you put this tefillin, it doesn't matter anything. I have it in my heart. But that's not the proper way to look at things. This is a very foolish way to look at things, If you don't do it on the outside, eventually the heart will also go away. It will also become corrupted, Because when you don't do all the outside things, because the outside, what happens is it encourages the inside also, to go in the same way. So when you do the outside, it has an effect on the inside. But when you don't do anything on the outside, you're all naked and you have no mitzvot on the outside, it also affects what you become on the inside, So one affects the other. One causes the other one to shift. This is the way it works. So a person shouldn't underestimate that, by the way. That how you look towards the outside has a great deal of influence of what you feel on the inside as well. One, right, moves the other. One effectuates the other. Mm-hmm. So Hashem should help us, that we should understand that. That, right, the way we look towards the outside is also what we become on the inside as well. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, amen ve'amen. Thanks for coming. Chazak u'baruch. Wealth, health, and happiness. And the victory for the right, our president, our beloved president, and a downfall for the enemies of God, the ones who support abortions and gay marriages, that they should fall down and never stand up again. Amen, amen. Chazak u'baruch.
Oh God! It's amazing. It's